Good evening, viewers. Welcome to your weekend dose of Media Scan, the show where we scan headlines, controversies, issues of the week with a fresh perspective. We have a full plate here, both on the global and the national sphere. And to dissect some of the issues, I also have a very interesting panel of experts with me this evening. But before I come to that, what made news? Closer home, polling winded up in Bihar today, while voters proved cynics completely wrong by turning up in big numbers. The campaign too made everyone sit up and take notice. With the aspirational Bihari in their mind, all political parties kept the focus on issues of good governance, all-round development of the state and forward-looking policies. The incumbent NDA, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi and CM Nitish Kumar, made it a point to focus on the infrastructure projects, social schemes and proactive assistance given to migrants, women, farmers, etc. The opposition, led by the RJD's Tejasvi Yadav, tried to woo the youth with promise of jobs. Most of the political commentators have welcomed the direction of the campaign. More on that in just a few moments. Of late, the media has been sharply divided on most issues, but journalist bodies, top editors and many politicians came together this week against the arrest of Arnab Goswami, the editor of Republic Television. Top newspapers questioned the high-handedness of the Maharashtra government and the police. Concerned journalists came out in protest in several cities. Meanwhile, with the shadow of suspicion looming large over TRPs, the I&B Ministry nominated a committee to take a fresh look at the system and devise new guidelines. The 4-member committee is headed by CEO Prasar Bharati, Shashi Shekhar Vempati. I have a special panel today to go threadbare into this for a wholesome perspective. Back-to-back terror attacks at iconic locations in Paris and Nice last week were followed by a similar attack in Vienna on Monday. More such attacks were feared in other cities, such as Budapest, rattling the entire continent. World leaders came together to stand with the nations under attack and extended unstinted support to French President Emmanuel Macron for his tough talk against terrorists. PM Modi was unequivocal in his support to the French president while calling out those who had criticized Macron. But Pakistan's Imran Khan, Malaysia's Mahathir bin Mohammed and Turkish Erdogan faced the ire of netizens and world leaders for their uncharitable comments on the French leadership. Delhi is now reeling with a third wave of COVID. For most of the week, the number of positive cases hovered well above 5,000. This generated some concern over shortage of beds, but the centre and state governments have assured the residents that hospitals are well prepared for the surge. For the rest of the country, recoveries are on the rise, well above 92%. Those were the headlines you saw for most of the week. To discuss a couple of these issues, I have a very special panel of guests with me. So let's first know who the guests are before we get on with the discussion. I have with me here Professor M.D. Nalapat, a well-known academic, columnist, commentator on political as well as strategic issues and foreign affairs. Professor Nalapat has had a long track record of observing Indian politics and foreign relations, as well as an observer of global issues. Welcome, Professor Nalapat, to Media Scan. This is your first time I am having you here, and I hope this is going to be a longer association.
Thank you very much.
I also have with me another very senior journalist, Siddharth Zarabi. Siddharth, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much.
Siddharth Zarabi has a long track record of working across the print, the electronic and also the digital media. At the same time, he is a keen observer and has been writing profusely on all current issues. A sharply divided media and acrimonious exchanges among channels has become the order of the day for almost more than 2 months. But policemen barging into the residence of Republic TV editor Arnab Goswami in the wee hours of the morning earlier this week, and arresting him shocked the entire industry. The arrest was condemned in one voice by leading media bodies, senior editors. Most central ministers and about half a dozen chief ministers, besides other senior politicians, also questioned the brazen manner of the Maharashtra government and police. Most editorials, which I read the next day, cautioned that this was a slippery road and it might end in complete erosion of democratic values. Which brings me to the first subject of discussion this evening, and I want to come to Professor Nalapat on this first. Sir, you have just relinquished charge as an office bearer of the Editors Guild of India. You continue to be a member of the body. We have seen the statement of the Guild as also other such media organizations. After a long time, we've observed that everybody has come out against the arrest in one voice, calling it high-handedness, and for once without any ifs and buts. What's your take on it?
Well, I've just joined the executive committee of the Editors Guild of India for the first time. And the Guild, of course, has come out with a very strong statement condemning what has happened to Arnab Goswami. It is completely unconscionable, frankly, and completely incompatible with any notion of freedom of speech or freedom of the press. And frankly, the fact that this kind of thing can be done and has been done multiple times over the decades indicates that there is need for systemic change. For example, criminal defamation law needs to be invalidated, and we need much more security for freedom of speech and freedom of press. Otherwise, it becomes very easy for governments to misuse their authority and to create problems for journalists and lock them up and create cases against them which can go on for years and years and ruin the rest of their lives. What happened to Arnab Goswami?
May I bring in Siddharth Zarabi here, sir, before I come back to you on the same subject. Mr. Zarabi, there may not have been many ifs and buts this time on this sudden development. However, we did read across newspapers and on many TV panels also that they pointed towards the matter being political. Do you think this is really political about one journalist against a state government? Does it have political connotations? Or do you think this is just the establishment versus a vocal journalist?
That's a good question that you asked me, and I purely would say that this is a completely political move which has been taken in on account of the sort of back and forth that has been happening between that channel and the government of the state of Maharashtra. Please understand that even if a case were to be reopened, and any police authority is well within its rights to do so, 99% of the time, such a case being reopened would have required a summons to be issued, where any person who is accused would have been required to join the investigation. Instead of doing that, the entire process was designed to send a signal and obviously browbeat the journalist. The fact that it happened inside his home, the fact that it happened in the manner in which it happened, encounter specialists were sent to lead that team, it tells everyone in this country that it is not a pure investigation, it is motivated by some other concerns. But the larger question that we need to take up, and I'll quickly mention it considering that what my fellow panelists said, and this is that it is now high time that there has to be an umbrella organization and a regulatory entity which can be self-governed, self-regulated, however, which provides a certain amount of closer coordination between all separate wings of the media or types of media, print, television, digital. It provides a framework where central and state authorities can also be part of it. It can have some amount of perhaps retired judicial people being in it, where complaints against the press and complaints by the press against anyone can be heard and disposed of in a quasi-judicial regulatory environment.
Okay, let me come to Professor Nalapat on that, because that's a completely new idea that you are proposing. Professor Nalapat, we have the Press Council of India, we have broadcasters associations and similar bodies. What Siddharth is suggesting here is a quasi-judicial body which can act as an appellate also perhaps, and an authority to adjudicate on all such complaints in a democratic setup and across different media platforms. Do you think this might work? Is it time to move towards that?
Well, I'd like to say that the era of print is fading away, just as the era of fossil fuels is fading away. And you are entering upon the era of virtual media. You're entering upon the era of social media. And frankly, trying to basically even create some kind of a direction on that is going to be very difficult. In the case of social media, for example, you can have messages beamed from outside the country, and authorities in the country, what will they be able to do? Nothing. So the reality is we'll have to accept that this kind of a situation is going to take place in which opinions are freely expressed. My point is very simple. Even if somebody gives an opinion that is totally opposed to my opinion, he or she has the right to that opinion. Similarly, I have the right to give an opinion which is totally opposed to her or his opinion. Now, about what happened in the case of Republic
just television, a cross question on that, sir. Just an interjection on that, Professor Nalapat.
Yeah,
when you say whatever the person may be speaking, he or she has a right to say it. I just wanted to check, there has been a lot of writing since the arrest about A kind of journalism and B kind of journalism, approving certain and not approving the other. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I'd like to say that anything involving incitement to violence, anything involving the possible breakup of the country is obviously off limits. Anything involving, for example, exploitation of people of minor, completely impermissible. But barring that, to be frankly, in my view, I think you are going to see a lot of this speech. It's going to be, in my view, impossible, given the technologies that are now coming up every day, including in India, to stop it or to police it. But the reality of the situation is that calling all the journalists of a channel, calling the executives of a channel, calling all kinds of officers of a channel over several days, I've not seen this since the emergency, frankly. I am really surprised to see this, and I'm really surprised to see the Maharashtra government. Uddhav Thackeray is a very fine individual from what I know about him, and the people. The Sharad Pawar is a very mature politician, and the Congress party there is also headed by some very good people. I'm really surprised that they have gone this far, because across the world, I can tell you, to see an entire news channel being penalized for a reason which is now plainly, according to the Mumbai police, non-journalistic, it seems to me to have cast a huge shadow on the whole country.
Right, sir. So with that, I want to move on to another aspect of this whole situation. Television rating points, or TRPs, have been suspect for several years. But the so-called TRP scam, which hit the industry a few weeks back, has hastened the demand for a complete overhaul of the criteria. As multiple states and various agencies investigate allegations of TRP tampering, BARC suspended its rating schedule completely for 3 months. With concerns being expressed by one and all, it's now the Information and Broadcasting Ministry that has formed a committee which will probe the entire process and frame new guidelines for the future. It's a 4-member committee. Prasar Bharati CEO Shashi Shekhar Vempati, he heads the committee. I want to come to Siddharth Zarabi on this, though both my guests have a very ringside view of the electronic media and how it works. Mr. Zarabi, do you also think there is much that leaves to be desired in the TRP criteria? And how can this committee help to bring about a fresh and unquestionable system?
Well, it is a very welcome step, and I would say that this step is likely to lead to the creation of a modern,
Yes.
transparent, and credible rating system in the country. I must also tell the viewers of this show that the beginning of this effort to sort of reform some of the issues that were prevailing in the earlier TAM system, which got converted
Yes.
into BARC, had been begun by the first NDA government sometime in 2015, 2016. And I'm now glad that this latest controversy has actually led to this development. In terms of why this is important, please understand that if you have a system where roughly 200 million or 20 crore devices, television devices, which are installed in this country, and the content that is being consumed on them across dozens and hundreds of channels, it is being rated by less than 40,000 meters.
True.
If you were to do the percentage calculation, it clearly tells you that it is a very minuscule sample. It is not even worth being called a sample. Now, why are these numbers less? Why are these, rating homes not 400,000 or 40 lakh out of 20 crore or even 40% of 20 crore? The reason is that there is a very significant cost involved in setting up those meters. Plus, with the advent of digital technologies, Professor Nalapat spoke about print's age being over.
Yes.
A similar technological change is sweeping through television newsrooms. And television as we know it, the television of today is not going to be the television of tomorrow. And therefore, there are dozens of technologies that are available
Which are at play.
to address this. One last point. It may surprise a lot of viewers that in the rating universe, DTH is not counted. Now, please understand that for dozens of years, ever since television news started in India, there has been a very small group of people who I will not name here, who have been controlling almost like a cartel the whole business of television ratings. And I compliment the government of India and the I&B ministry, Prakash Javadekar ji, that they have taken this step to, and this committee has an open-ended tenure as far as I
Yes,
understand, to come up with
and a
a new
wide
system,
mandate.
because that is the need of the hour. There are enough technologies and enough options available to create a system which is transparent. And I just want to end, if there is a system which does not take care or account for Doordarshan's reach as the system of the past was, then clearly there is a problem.
Yes. So, fine. So, on that, Professor Nalapat, two things that Siddharth just raised. A, the minuscule amount of the sample, which he says should not actually even qualify as a sample, and every day updated and new upgraded technologies getting into the media industry. Do you really agree that a relook is imminent now? And number two, as a veteran who has observed the Indian media and also global practices, what would you propose to make this more credible, more useful and representative?
Well, I'd like to say that Information Minister Javadekar has done the right thing, and I fully agree with Siddharth's points. The reality of the situation is that TRP, through some agency that is accepted as gospel by advertising agencies, can decide whether a channel will thrive or a channel will go under. So they have the power of life and death over channels. And having that kind of life and death power, it's very important that it be used in a manner that is transparent and fair. And it's very important that the whole business of TRPs, as Siddharth correctly said, should be in a manner that is transparent and fair. And today, with Digital India, which Prime Minister Modi is promoting, It's easier and easier to ensure that technologies will be there to go ahead with this kind of thing.
Right.
And you don't have
Allow
to
me.
rely on methods that you did 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
Right.
Today, every
Allow me to
15
cut you
months, you
short
can
here,
change your method.
Professor Nalapat. Allow me to cut you short here because I also want your and Siddharth's perspective on another very interesting subject. Earlier today, EVMs carrying the verdict of Bihar were locked away in the strong rooms. We will only know what's inside next week. However, the high voltage campaign did make everyone sit up and take notice for one reason. Of course, there were the usual personal jibes, snide comments, tall claims, challenges, but the campaign from both sides was largely focused on development and good governance. The top guns of the incumbent NDA led by PM Modi and Chief Minister Nitish Kumar highlighted their efforts towards building infrastructure, long pending development projects, social sector schemes, and financial assistance to the poor, the migrant workforce, and women. At the same time, women-oriented schemes and their empowerment was the prime showcase of the government. Across the fence, opposition leaders, particularly led by Tejaswi Yadav, tried to pin the government on unemployment. So, this brings me to my first question to Siddharth Zarabi. Mr. Zarabi, this has been the bane of Indian campaign for a long time. But do you think we finally reached the point where we can say that issues of good governance, bread and butter issues as we say, and Bijli Sadak Pani may finally override caste and other identity affiliations? Do you think we've reached that point in Bihar this time?
Well, the answer to whether that actually happens will be available by noontime on 10th.
Yes.
But you raise a good point, and I would say that most political observers and other analysts perhaps need to spend greater time in understanding how there has been such a big change. After all, remember Bihar, as far as India's politics is concerned, is a very significant place, and a trend that has started from Bihar in this election could well echo across other state elections also, because we know that there will be a weaker economic sentiment that has to be countered in the near future. I think the summation of this Bihar campaign this time round is very clear, that a
Yes.
challenger was able to bring forth and challenge a seven-time chief minister with a promise that while it is completely outlandish, while there is no math, science, research that has been done for the promise, but to just simply give this slogan of 1 million jobs and how that has changed the hawa of the Bihar election is very important. And I think one of the most important slogans that has emanated purely from a political analysis point of view is the fact that that one of the contenders spoke about how Bihar's politics has moved from social justice to economic justice. And that is where I believe from Bihar, other elections, upcoming state elections, will also perhaps pivot on this crucial issue. And I think it is a welcome development, because to some extent, at least in the youth of India, there are chances that they will rise above their current sort of caste and creed and look at larger issues.
Right. So let me come to Professor Nalapat on the same subject and have his take on this. Professor Nalapat, is the youth finally ready to look beyond their caste and community affiliations and look at the aspirational Bihari about whom we have been reading and hearing a lot? Or do you think it's actually difficult to make such a cut and dry discrimination between identity voting or voting on good governance? I mean, do the two things come and overlap each other at some point?
Well, I'd like to point out that people from Bihar, across the world, in foreign countries, they do extremely well.
Yes.
In Manipal University, for example, you have a very large contingent of students from Bihar, and they are very good students. And we have teachers also who are from Bihar, who are first class. The problem is that caste politics and politics of religion, politics of caste has basically ruined the administration in Bihar, which is why so many tens of millions of Biharis have had to go to other parts of the country and the world where they
Precisely.
do very well. So I think it will be a very good sign if you take the focus away from caste and religion, because frankly, caste and religious politics leads nowhere. We all breathe the same air, we all drink the same water, and frankly, if you want an economic policy, it has to work for everybody. And if you can't have a segmented policy. So I think it's going to be a referendum on economic policy, both
So
central and
I'm
state.
afraid I'm completely running out of time now. We've had a beautiful discussion, very healthy with a complete 360-degree perspective. Just before I conclude, I want one quick comment from you, sir, on the women voters of Bihar. Do you think from what we are watching in the last 1 or 2 elections, the women have been able to manage a distinct vote bank of their own? And do you think they are in a position to independently make a voting choice?
Well, I'd like to say the answer is yes. Why? Because women are now embracing education, and very importantly, the men in their family, especially the older men, are beginning to realize how foolish, how retrogressive it is to not give the daughter the same opportunity as sons are given. I think, quite frankly, that welcome change is coming across India, and I think the women of India definitely deserve equality, and they will get it.
Right. So on that very positive note, I'm afraid I've completely run out of time. So I must thank profusely both my guests here, Siddharth Zarabi and Professor
Thank you
Nalapat.
very much.
Thank you so much for joining us, and I hope to connect with you again on Media Scan.
Thank
With
you.
that, I come to the conclusion of this episode. However, do keep watching DD India, and we will come back next week on another episode of Media Scan. Meanwhile, we'll continue to scan the media for you. Good night.